Welcome back to Roundtail Restoration, everybody. My name's Chris. You know, I restored the Spitfire several years ago, and I've never been really happy with the brakes. I don't have a whole lot of experience driving cars, obviously from the 60s, and it's not power assisted or anything like that, and modern braking systems are obviously, you know, magical. But I can't lock the wheels up. I've never been able to lock the wheels up, and that just doesn't seem right to me. So I have invested a little bit of money here, and we're gonna go ahead and totally redo the braking system as far as the piece parts and everything, and I got a couple of things here that are aftermarket, hopefully a little bit better quality, so I'll show you what I got. Thanks for watching. Let's get it sorted. So in my attempt to make the brakes better, I sent rear wheel cylinders. I have extras. I sent these away and got them re-sleeved by Apple Hydraulics in Long Island. You can see that's a nice brass sleeve in there. And so I got both of those done. And I also sent the master cylinder out and got that re-sleeved. Now these I had spares of. This came out of the car because when it was in the car, I was bleeding the brakes and the piston stuck somewhere in the middle of the chamber here, and all of a sudden there was no pedal. So thank God that didn't happen when I was driving. So this quickly came out of the car and was replaced by an aftermarket one, TRW one. So still, I mean, TRW one's nothing wrong with it, but I would like to stick with original. I also went and invested in 2 rear brake drums. They were the ones that are on there didn't get cut, they're original, and you know, the inside of those is probably not the best. Can't find anybody to cut that stuff anymore because of the insurance, so it's hard to keep the original ones. And I also invested in Goodrich brake lines. These I picked up at Rimmer Brothers when they were on sale one time, so I got a full set of those, and hopefully that'll take care of some of that sponginess. I also picked up a set of that for the TR4 for when that comes around. So I've got to obviously take everything apart. Gonna bench bleed the master cylinder. Once I also got new rebuild kits for all this here, so I've got all new rubber, even though what was in there had been previously rebuilt. I decided to get new kits anyway, so I'll be doing that. And bench bleed in the master cylinder. I did not do that on the one that's on the car, so hopefully that'll give me a little bit of performance enhancement on my brakes too. But all in all, hopefully this stuff, you know, this investment here will make it a little better. By the way, to get these re-sleeved, all 3 of those pieces there was about $340, so not real cheap, frankly. But like I said, I like to have the original stuff, and the brass will probably last for absolutely ever. So there you go. Now let's dig into it. First thing we're going to do here is rebuild the master cylinder. Now I have new rubber, like I had mentioned. The only piece of rubber I'm not going to replace is the little cap. 1, this is an original Girling, and 2, these I have a hard time getting these on and off in the past without tearing the rubber, and I don't really want to do that. But all of the rest of the rubber is going to be replaced. So this is the plunger. Obviously, it's just a single piston here, not you know, top of technology in the mid '60s. Not too great today. But essentially, this is kind of clipped together. And there's a little clip right here. I'll zoom in on it. You got to bend that out, and that releases this whole thing, and this will come apart, and then we can get to all the individual little rubber pieces, parts, and I'll show you how it all comes apart and goes back together. Now, I am using .5 silicone-based brake fluid, the stuff that does not eat your paint. You can find back and forths all over the place on whether this stuff is what you should be using or not. I chose to do it mainly for the paint concerns. I think when I do the TR4, however, I am going to stick with .4 or .3. Biggest reason because for whatever reason, and I'm not sure if it's because of the rubber seals concerns for them or what, but if you send away stuff to this Apple Hydraulics, who I've had them re-sleeve, if they rebuild the whole thing and put all new pieces parts in it, they will not warranty it if you use .5 brake fluid. So I did not ask them why, but I have a feeling it has to do with the rubber parts that may not be able to withstand. Now, all this rubber is new. I don't expect those problems. It's always been new, and I don't think .5 brake fluid is my problem with my brakes, but I wanted to just point that out. So I'll show you the close-up here on how to get this thing apart, and we'll get this all new seals on here and get it put back together. So right here, you can see that little tab. What we'll do is we'll take a little flathead screwdriver, we'll pry that up a little bit, and that'll release this whole thing. There's like a little lip inside here on the main piston that holds that in. So you want to be a little careful. It's steel, it's not aluminum or anything, so you don't have to worry about really damage it. Just pry it up just enough to move it apart. And then the piston comes out. And then this guy all stays together with that spring. So there's not a whole lot to the piston itself, but it does have the rubber seal on it. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't want to zinc plate these things because I don't know if that would change my characteristics, but there is a little bit of corrosion on here because it's been sitting. So I am going to take it over to the wire wheel and clean it up. Got the orange stick here, or plastic or wood. You don't want to break these seals. Now this one I'm not too concerned with because I'm replacing it anyway. But for the new ones, especially if you have to pry, you want to use something that's not going to cut it, like metal. All right, so there's the piston. So like I said, we'll go over to the grinding wheel with the brass wire wheel, get this cleaned up and be right back. Got that all cleaned up. Now, obviously, if you find any severe pitting or anything like that, while this plunger does not provide a seal per se, you still, you don't want it to mar up the inside of this nice new sleeve that's in there, or the existing one if yours was in pretty good shape. So if this piston is marred up, you don't want to reuse it. I don't know if these are available. I don't think so. So you'd have to probably invest in a whole new master cylinder, but mine are in good shape. So now this spring here, essentially what this does, there's a little, I'll have to take it apart. You're probably not going to be able to see, but inside this little cup here, so you got that spring inside that cup here at the end. If you can see that cut out, it's kind of like a teardrop shape almost, oblong. What happens is this little pin here has got a notch or a ball end, kind of, whatever that would be called, and that goes in here and then puts up and locks in, and that's how that kind of goes together, and the spring keeps it all under tension. So you've got that cup. I'll clean that up. You got this little end piece, and this is plastic, so you want to be careful with this. And then on the plunger here, you've got a little spring washer that comes in the rebuild kit, and then one little rubber seal right here that also comes in the rebuild kit. So again, we're going to go get these cleaned up real quick at the wire reel just to get a little bit of the surface rust that's off of there, and we'll be right back. So I got a little cup here of brake fluid, .5 brake fluid, and yes, it is purple when it's brand new. That kind of freaked me out the first time I saw it, but that is correct. And I misspoke. This is actually metal, this little end cap piece here, but it's pot metal, so you still want to be careful with it because it might break on you. So now we're just going to essentially do a reverse what I just did. We're going to do the end cap first. So you've got this new rubber piece here, and that essentially fits over top. And it only goes on one way. And again, I'm sorry that these parts are really small, and I don't know how well they're going to show up on camera. If you can see that, it's kind of cupped. So that cup is where this portion, the top portion of that plunger fits. Again, if it'll focus there. Oh, had it. That top lip. So we want to lubricate this guy a little bit. And slide that right on there. You want to lubricate with the brake fluid. All right, and then I like to kind of give it a spin a little bit so it seals. All right, and you can see, I think, how that worked there. I'm going to get better light. All right, hopefully that's a little bit better. You can see how that kind of fit in there. Just a little cup in. Now, you got that little spring washer. That guy goes right there. Like that. There's no direction for that guy. And then your little cap goes on like that, and you can see how it's kind of sprung. And if you don't remember this stuff, you want to, try to, I've got another one here just laying to the side that I can always look at, make sure I'm not messing up. Now that end piece, that piece on that other one is plastic. So obviously they changed at some point. But anyway, don't forget that little spring washer. So now you got that. Then we're going to put the spring down on top of this guy, like so. And then this cap is going to go on. We're going to lubricate that cap because it's got to fit down inside that spring, which can be a little tight. If you are using .3 or 4 brake fluid here, obviously you might have some concern about paint. So using this as a lubricant, you want to be careful. So again, like I had mentioned with that little teardrop shape in there, we're going to go ahead and compress the spring and get that into that hole and slide it over, and it stays there like that. Now, when we put this piston in, you can see that little lip on the piston there. That's we're going to bend that, and it's going to connect up. Sometimes it'll come apart on you. that little lip is going to fit right down into there when we bend it down. Anyway, so we'll go ahead, get this together, set this aside. All right, so that's under tension there. Now we got to worry about the seal on the plunger, and you want to make sure also that you put this seal on the right direction. That's important. I'll show you in the workshop manual how you figure that out. So this is actually the TR4 workshop manual, but it's the same kind of design. So you got that little end cap and the plunger and the rubber seal, the spring and the little cap, and then the big plunger. And you can see that the main plunger seal is fat towards the back of the master cylinder. Okay, here's a kind of a zoomed out view. So you want the fat end of the seal to face the reservoir, not to face the front of it, because and that tends to make sense, because as you push, right, you wanted all that fluid to gang up right here as you push this in. So your mode of travel is this way, so you want that seal to become sealed right away. So the flare, the fat end of the flare needs to go towards the back of the brake. So it's going to go on like that. Now this is a little bit tight. You kind of saw maybe how tricky it was to get the old one off. So we're going to lubricate this up real good all over this place here and the rubber seal itself, and we'll get it slid on. Guess I could have a little brush to do this, but didn't grab it. All right, so again, so the seal is going to go like this. That's the direction of travel because the plunger is going to push here. So we want the fat end that way, facing the back. All right, so it's going to look just like that. So now that will fit down inside the cup there. And then once that locks in, you're going to take that flathead screwdriver again and push it down until it just sneaks behind the bottom of the plunger there. That'll lock everything in. All right, you want to pull on it. I also spin it to make sure, but you want to make sure that that doesn't come apart. Obviously, that'd be bad if your plunger came disconnected there, but that should do it. So now that is all new rubber seals everywhere, properly lubricated. Now we'll go ahead and look at putting this inside the master cylinder itself. All right, got the master cylinder itself here. Now you'll notice that there is pitting, I think, on the bottom here because that's how it sat, right? So all the old brake fluid that had absorbed the water and everything as the car sat over the years would sit there and start to corrode. The inside of this, there's a circlip that also comes in the repair kit. That circlip, there's a little groove machined in there. That circlip's going to fit inside of that groove. So as long as this machining here, or this pitting, excuse me, doesn't interfere with getting that ring gear in there, that snap ring in there, you should be okay. But if this starts to deteriorate to the point where it looks like that snap ring could pop out of there, again, you want to look at getting a new master cylinder. So this is in fine shape. There's not really a liquid seal here, right? That seal is inside, so you're not really worried about, it's just a dust seal more than anything. But we're going to go ahead now and put the piston in. We're going to lubricate that in there, but it goes in like this because this piece here, this is where your pedal is connected here. The back of this is a nice smooth thing, and that's what goes inside of there and interacts with that. This washer goes and seals it, and the snap ring goes over that washer. I'll show you obviously as we get closer to putting it in. But you want to lubricate this all up, lubricate the inside of that. I am going to get a brush for this just so I have a good amount here. Probably pour some brake fluid in here, let it go back and forth and everything, and then we'll slide that piston in. You want to give it one last look before you go putting this in. Make sure there's no little pieces of dirt or anything like that. Nice and clean in here so that, again, you don't want to be cutting the bore or the brass, depending on if you had it re-sleeved. You don't want to be cutting any of that stuff and doing any damage. All right, and it should go in and then spring load in. So as I push that plunger in, it's going to want to come out a little bit. If you do it hard enough, you can see that that starts to come out, and that way you can grab it and take it back out if you have to. But now that that's good to go, now we'll put this portion on, and again, that fits down in there like that. And then we're going to get the little snap ring. Got to get my snap ring pliers, and then I'll go in and snap over top of that washer, and that'll seal everything down. There's no other rubber seals here, right? There shouldn't be any fluid on this side at all, right? Because you put that rubber seal on the plunger, on the main plunger, so there should be no fluid that ever gets in here. If there is, you've got a brake problem. Alrighty, so now we've got that all ready to go here. I'm going to lubricate the inside of this, or the outside of the master cylinder here where the seal is going to go, just because it's easy. Lubricate the inside of the seal a little bit. Probably should have cleaned that up a little bit better so it's prettier. Oh well. All right, so now that's going to fall down on like that. And then we'll take the circlip, snap the circlip down there. And I'm probably going to have to kind of hold this weird and everything like that. So I'll come back here in a second and show you. All right, obviously you need to get the circlip on the outside there so you can get yourself set up. I'm definitely going to block the shot here. I'm trying not to, but get it started. Then you can just use your screwdriver or orange stick or something. Kind of push it in the rest of the way. All right, there we go. And it might float around in there a little bit. You can see it's not real tight. That's okay. It doesn't have to be exact or anything like that. You're not trying to maintain pressure there. And then the rubber seal goes on. All right, and that's that. So this should move nice and easily, and you can see that it does. Like I had mentioned, my old one got hung up. That was horrible. So now set this aside. We're going to bench bleed it, but I want to go ahead and do essentially the same thing, but with the wheel cylinders for the rear and get them rebuilt, all new seals for that. Real quick though, before I forget, you also got the cap here, and there's a seal that goes on the cap, and the rebuild kit also comes with a seal for that. So just because I can, I'm going to go ahead and replace that as well, even though this one looks perfectly fine. There is a little itty bitty hole in here. You can see that little itty bitty hole. You do want to make sure that this is vented. So if nothing else, go through and stick a pin or something, whatever kind of cap design you have. Make sure those holes are not obstructed at all, because you don't want to draw a vacuum or anything inside your master cylinder. So we're going to go ahead and put the cap on, just to keep any particulate out of there. We'll set that guy aside, and now we'll move on to the wheel cylinders. Wheel cylinders essentially are pretty much the same thing. These are 3/4 inch ones. So you've got your original piston here and the seal on there, and I got all new seals again. So those seals come with it, and then there's little rubber caps just to kind of cover it up, much like the master cylinder. Those come with the kit. What you don't get with the kit are these metal rings, and these are the retaining rings for that cap. So you want to make sure that you hold on to those. Now these are in pretty good shape. I am going to go clean them up. Same thing, get the rubber seals off of these pistons here and get them cleaned up on the bench grinder, and then come back and put these together. The seal goes the same way, if you can see already on there how that taper is. And the taper is going to go towards the back as it pushes. So you want that, if your orientation is like this little thing here goes towards the front. That's what gets pushed on when you do the emergency brake. And then obviously the fluid comes in through this side. So the fluid's going to come in through this side and travel, and the piston's going to go like this and actuate the brakes. Got the all that stuff cleaned up. So now again, we're going to go ahead and put the seals on. So this is the end that's going to be coming outside of the piston. So the end that's going to be coming inside. Got the new kit here. Kit comes with the caps, and then the seals themselves, and then little caps for the bleed screws. So we want to again lubricate this up. I'm smart enough to grab a brush this time. Lubricate this inside of the seals at least. All right, so again, it's going to go with a flare towards going this way. And spin it to make sure that it's fully seated in there. See it like that. Same thing for the other one. Again, spin it. Make sure it's fully seated. And that's that for that. Now the cylinders themselves. Lubricate the inside of that a little bit. And then it's going to go in like that with the flare towards the back, because again, the fluid comes in here, and you want that fluid to hit that flare, and if anything, open it up a little bit so that it tends to seal better. If you go the other way, you might not get a good seal. So this seal here, If I remember right, these are a little tight, and you don't want to roll the lip, so make sure that you're well lubricated here. And you want to, if possible, put an end in that you can see, so that if you are rolling the lip, you can see it and stop it. Get the orange stick here to help. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Nope, that went all the way in. All right, so unfortunately, there's no real way to test this. You can't grab it really all that easily. So there's not a good way to know until you hook it up that you're in there. Get the other one, do the same thing. Use the orange stick a little bit to help. All right, got that on. Now the rubber caps, they're just kind of fit halfway over. So you've got that little piece of the piston right there, and that's going to fit inside of that cap. And it doesn't go all the way around, obviously, but let's get some lubrication in there. Might have to pull these out a little bit, just so I get a good seal. Yeah, I'm gonna grab a pair of soft tooth pliers just to pull these plungers out just a little bit. See if that helps me get the caps on a little bit better. All right. Well, anyway, I think you guys know what you need to do here. I'm gonna finish up off camera, but essentially you want to get that lip over this seal, and then put the little clips on there. When I get to that point, I'll come back and show you. Got it finally. You can see, I think that bottom lip is kind of curled up a little bit. I don't know if you can see that or not. That makes it a little tricky. There's not really a recess in there for it to fit in, but that's how the other set that are on there right now are. So now you just take these metal clips here. Half of it kind of goes on the, just kind of slips over top here. Holds this guy in. All right, and it kind of holds the back of it, so it doesn't go over top of the main portion. It goes over top of the back more so. Try to spin that around to get it centered a little bit. So like that. So that fits in that groove there. It doesn't fit over top of it. All right, just like that. All right, so those should be good to go now. Now the next thing up is to bench bleed the master cylinder. Believe it or not, I've never done that before. So we're gonna see how it works. So I got the setup here for bench bleeding. So just a bleed screw, plastic tubing obviously goes back into the reservoir. So I'll fill the reservoir up, and then I'm just gonna work the plunger, and eventually, hopefully, all the air bubbles will come out. And once that's done, obviously take care of it to not to spill or anything like that. Take it apart, and then it'll be ready to go in the car. At least that's the idea. All right, so that's pretty full here. So this tubing might be too much, might be too long, but it shouldn't really matter. Eventually it'll just fill back up. So I'm still getting a little bit of air at the very, very end, and I think what's happening is I'm sucking it in through the bleed screw. So I'm going to call it good. Take that off and cap it. So the first thing we're going to do is swap out the master cylinder. So you got the boot on here, and then probably a circlip or a cotter pin. What I got is one of those little spring-loaded things just to save me pain in the future. And then that comes out with one of these little guys. So now you have to unbolt the master cylinder, obviously, and disconnect it hydraulically. Now, if I remember right, and unfortunately, there's no easy way to do this with it still in the housing to get to the bottom bolt under here. So I think that whole housing might have to come off. One thing to point out too is this arm here. Now this is a new master cylinder, so I don't expect a problem here, but you want to check these and make sure that these aren't rounded out over the years. These got oblong, and in the pedal itself, I know for one of the pedals, I think it was the clutch, I actually filled that hole in and re-drilled it just because it had gotten elongated over the years. So you want to make sure that that's not happening, at least not too bad, so that in case you you want immediate response to the pedal. You don't want any play if you can help it. So we'll go ahead and we'll get a socket and a ratchet here and pull this bracket up and out of the way a little bit, and hopefully that'll give us enough access to get to that bottom bolt on the master cylinder. All right, these are 7/16, and there's no nuts on the other side, so that makes it convenient. You don't have to worry about a nut. And there's 6 bolts total that hold the pedal box in. So even if you remove these 4, you still got 2 more back there that'll kind of hold the pedal in, so you don't have to worry about losing the pedal when you pull this bracket up. So at least in that way, it's not too bad. All right, so now that I can be able to get to that bottom bolt now. All right, so the bracket's off now. Again, I'm going to just take a rag here and clean this stuff up real quick while I can. There's actually surprisingly quite a bit of fluid around here, so got a little bit of a leak somewhere, I guess. One of the benefits of the .5, if this was .3, I'd have paint would be gone all over the place. All right, so now I got is this little connection here, just the hydraulics, so I'm going to bring the new master cylinder over and try to do a quick swap. Actually, while I'm here, I might as well go ahead and screw it in. That didn't work too well. Got brake fluid all over the place. Pretty sure I lost my bench prime there, if I even ever had it. All right, well, I don't know if that was the best way to do that, but seems to have worked. Now we'll get the bracket bolted back down here. Check and make sure this guy is tight. Oh, almost forgot. You got to put the boot on now. Probably easiest, while you can still move everything around. All right, there we go. So master cylinder's in. Top it off with a little bit of fluid because I'm going to be doing some other stuff where I'm going to lose fluid. So we'll move on. All right, excuse the engine noise. It's outside. But the next thing I want to do is replace this brake line here. The soft line goes obviously from the hard pipe through the bracket into the caliper. And I've got these Goodrich lines like I showed you. So there's 2 long ones and 2 short ones. The 2 long ones go up front, 2 short ones go in the rear. I'm going to probably lose quite a bit of brake fluid here, make a mess, but there's not really anything you can do about that. So we'll just try to be quick, and I'm not sure how effective it's going to be at trying to show you this stuff. There's not a whole lot to it. It's just swapping 1-for-1s. Back at the passenger side rear brake here, we're going to be removing the drum and then getting to the master cylinder, or the brake cylinder, and also doing the hose. And that shouldn't be too bad. I do have some emergency brake interaction here to kind of worry about. And if I remember right, there's a cotter pin on the holding that together. So it comes off pretty easy. Obviously, remember to undo your parking brake. Now you can see the inside here has never been machined, at least as far as I know. But so it's worn. There's some pitting, not too bad, but it's it's old. There's a lot of pitting on the outside. It's original. The new ones here, obviously nice and shiny, and pretty nice on the inside. So we'll clean them up before we put them on. So now here's your piston, your brake caliper. Now this is an aftermarket one. It's probably TRW. I'm sure it. As a matter of fact, I think the guy I bought it from had a whole new rear brake job, so I'm sure I redid him at some point and verified everything. But that's going to come out and get bolted out. And before I do that, I'm going to remove the hose. Now you're not going to really be able to see that because it's buried in here, but the hose comes from a hard brake line, goes into the hose and comes in between the leaf spring here, in between the wishbones or whatever they're called, and then into the cylinder. So what I did is take an old brake line here, and just hammer the end flat. So what I'll be able to do is undo the brake line and then screw this in and snug it up a little bit. And hopefully that'll prevent any incidental leakage from the master cylinder, just so I don't make a mess. I mean, I'm going to have to bleed the brakes no matter what. I'm not trying to save that, but I just, if I can help a little bit of brake fluid, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'll unbolt the brake line first, get it unbolted from the piston or the wheel cylinder, and then start to work on getting the wheel cylinder off. Got the brake line off and got that capped back there. Now that the unions back there, the flare unions are not, my little plug that I made, the flare unions are not perfect. They're both, that you've got two essentially male fitting up together, and it's working. It's not drip, drip, drip like it would be if nothing was there, but it's not leak tight. But if you look at the cables, and we'll compare the new cables or the lines with the old lines. So here's the one that I just took off. So this end right here is what goes into the hard brake line. And this end here, if you note, one, it's flat. There's no real flare or anything like that. It's not a standard brake line. That's what goes into the back of the wheel cylinder. Looking at the new lines, a little bit different. You got the one end, that's about the same, right? About the same length and all that. So obviously that one's gonna work fine. But if you look at the other end, that's exactly the same. So it's like a brake line. So looking at the inside of the wheel cylinder, it's not flat like this one is, but these take copper washers. There's no copper washers that go on these, just like the fronts. So we're gonna go ahead now and break into the wheel cylinder to get the wheel cylinder off. And you're not gonna be able to see, but there's like spring clips behind here and a rubber boot and all that I'll try to get off and then show you when I get out of that and show you how that kind of fits up. But again, because tight quarters here, you're not gonna really be able to see anything. So I'll come back when I get the cylinder off. There's that little cotter pin right there. That guy's got to come out because the lever runs through the cylinder, and I'll just never get it off. Changed my mind a little bit. I will try to show you as much as I can. So this is the emergency brake line coming in, the parking brake, and I've got you got one of those pins, and instead of a cotter pin, I used the spring clips, kind of like that I used up front with the master cylinder. So you got that on there. That just makes this easier to come apart. You'll also notice that I have the pin going down, right, with the lipped end fitting down. The idea behind that is if for whatever reason this spring clip fails and falls out, then this pin will not rattle out and I'll still have the ability. It might not be quite as secure with that spring pin in there, obviously, but I'll have the ability to go ahead and still hopefully actuate the e-brake if I have to, or parking brake. So I'll take that off, set that aside. So doing that releases like the tension on the actuating arm here. So we'll have to get that cotter pin out. Once I get that cotter pin out, I should be able to fish that arm out, and that'll kind of loosen up the master cylinder. Or the wheel cylinder. I don't think I'm going to have to take the pads off. Man, I hope not, because I don't really want to mess with that. I should be able to get this out, hopefully, without having to do with that. But we'll go get a pair of pliers. Never reuse cotter pins, so we'll go get a pair of pliers and probably destructively remove that cotter pin. All right, cotter pin is out. Be able to fish this arm out, I think. Maybe. Maybe not. So you got a rubber boot on the back, and won't be able to see that until I kind of sneak this out here. So the rubber boot just kind of comes off, so we'll clean that guy up, and that looks to be in good shape, not torn at all, so that's good. That's held up. Oh, I know why I can't get that arm out. So the arm is actually kind of hinged on the wheel cylinder. I forgot about that. So now behind the wheel cylinder here, there's springs. And again, you won't be able to see this, but I'll show you here. You just need a flathead screwdriver. Just kind of push these springs out. It's like a friction fit almost. It's actually... it's kind of scary if you think about it, but the fact that you want this thing to float a little bit, or at least I think you do, kind of makes it okay, I guess. So these are those spring clips, and this one, if you can see that, that's all bent and everything, so it's at a tension. So this one fits behind the cylinder and pinches the cylinder into the brake drum backing, and then this guy comes in, and you can see it's got holes in it, and it kind of fits into these two little indentations here, and just the springing of it pinched between the wheel cylinder and the back of the brake plate here, kind of keeps it all together. So now that wheel cylinder is all loose and should come out the front, but I think I might not have a choice but to remove the brake pads or the brake shoes, which is unfortunate. Now, this is what you get for not reading the workshop manual before you come to do this. I got to remove these brake shoes now, so we'll go ahead and push and get these brake shoes out. Shouldn't be too bad. It's these little spring clips that can be a pain in the rear, and I don't have the little special tool for it. All right, so now the brake drums are loose, but still sprung. I'm hoping I can sneak this guy out of here without having to undo the springs, because they can be a pain in the rear, and I don't have the workshop manual, so I won't be able to cheat and check. Looks like I can leave the emergency brake arm in there. Waiting for this thing to kind of fly apart on me here any second. Oh, got lucky. So here is the wheel cylinder, and I thought these were TRW, but they are not. So that makes me feel a little bit better to put in my rebuilt ones. So these are just aftermarket. There's nothing wrong with them, so I am gonna hold on to them. I'm gonna steal the bleed screw out of them, because the bleed screws that I have are not in great shape as far as corrosion goes. I changed my mind. I will not be using these bleed screws because they're metric. No metric on my car. Imperial only. All right, so let me grab a wheel cylinder. All right, well, the spring came popped, so much for trying to save it. There's that emergency brake arm. Just get that in there. You got to trap that almost, for lack of a better way to put it. So we'll put the wheel cylinder in there. And the wheel cylinder has got to fit properly for the emergency brake arm. So that kind of gets pinched in there and pivoted. Now this spring will go in like this. All right, so if you can see the direction of the spring there, it's going to go in like this with the two little dots sticking out. And there's like grooves inside the wheel cylinder. So you hold that in, and then this guy is going to fit in just like this. And we'll complete the entrapment. And it's not tight or anything. It just kind of does a compression fit. So I just take a screwdriver and kind of drive it home so that those, like I had mentioned, those two little holes fit in those two little indentations. And that's really all there is to that. Let's see if I can't get this spring on here without much trouble. All right, well, I was hoping to get away with a lot less pain than this, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. So I'm going to go offline here for a little bit, do some studying, and I'll be back. All right, well, I'm sorry. It's magic, but I got it. So a couple things you want to make sure of. You got the wheel adjuster all the way at the bottom here, and you want to make sure that both brake shoes kind of fit inside of the little grooves inside of that thing. I'll show you close up here in a sec. And then you also want to make sure that the grooves up top here, that the arm sticks out for the emergency brake. Obviously, I got to reconnect that, but let me show you down there real quick. All right, so I think you can see there how you got the grooves in the brake adjuster. This is for setting the emergency brake, the parking brake. The brake shoes have those little extra tabs on them. Those fit in there. And then up here, this one fits inside the little tab in the wheel cylinder. And then that side, all you're really worried about is the emergency brake fitting in there. So the piston, which is here, is what's going to push out and pivot that whole thing around. Also, don't forget that you got to redo the brake shoe pins, which I almost just forgot. Before you put the brake thing on, like I almost forgot, you got to put this boot on. So this just fits over the sleeve there and then over everything else. And just kind of get in there and kind of fits over everything. It should fit pretty much flush with the back of the brake, the back panel, the back, whatever this thing is, round thing is called, or everything bolts to. All right, so now we've got the pin and all that kind of stuff for the emergency brake actuator. Again, like I had mentioned, I put it pinned down so that if this cotter pin, in my case, this spring pin does break, I don't lose everything. All right, so that's in. Now, you want to adjust the brake adjuster down so that the brakes move in, or at least I am here because I'm putting a new brake drum on, so I assume it's going to be a little bit skinnier, not worn. So it's a little guy, a little 1/4 inch wrench, and there's a little square piece off back here, so we'll turn that loose a little bit, just a couple times. And now give it one last check. I almost forgot my cotter pin. Again, you never want to reuse cotter pins. So the best way not to reuse cotter pins is go out and buy yourself a handful of different sizes and just have them on hand so that when you come across the time where, oh crap, I need a cotter pin, you can go to that little toolbox there and look for them, and then you don't have an excuse to reuse it. All right, don't need to be too complicated there. You just want to make sure that it's not going to fall out on you. All right, so that should be it. So again, make sure you get that cotter pin in, make sure you get your emergency brake reconnected, get your bleed screw in there and kind of snugged up. So when you reconnect everything, you don't immediately have stuff dripping all over the place uncontrolled. Get the emergency brake loosened up a little bit from the back, from the brake adjuster. Make sure that the pads are in their respective spots and fully seated. Give it a quick once over. Give it a good look. And once that's done, your brake drum should go on. And if it doesn't, you just have to loosen up that adjuster a little bit more. And then you've got 2 screws that hold the brake drum in, even though bolting the tire on does the same thing. There's that. Next up is going to be putting the hose on. You got to put the hose inside the wheel cylinder first because you got to spin the whole thing, and that's obviously not going to work because the hose has to spin here, not the nut. And then when we go to connect it to the hard pipe, that nut spins, so you don't have that problem there. All right, so that should be good. I'm not going to worry about setting the emergency brake now. So same thing, other side. No surprises, hopefully, on that side. Got this all back together. Obviously not my prettiest performance to date, and it is brakes, so you don't want to mess around with this stuff, but it works. So we'll go around the other side, replace that wheel cylinder, same exercise. So next up, what we're going to do is bleed the brakes. Very high-tech plastic tubing and a Diet Coke bottle, and essentially that's going to be my bleeding mechanism, so you can do a one-man bleed. This is a little wasteful of brake fluid, and .5 stuff is not real cheap, unfortunately, compared to the other stuff, but it's really my only option right now because I don't have somebody to help me bleed the brakes. I do have one of those Mighty Vac pumps, and I've used it a couple times, and frankly, I'm not really that impressed, and I don't think it does a real great job, so I'm going to go ahead and try this method, which I have not tried before, and see how it works. So essentially what you'll do is I'll take this tubing, and I'm going to drill a hole in the cap of the soda bottle, put the tubing until it goes all the way down, put some brake fluid in there so that it covers the end of the tubing completely, and then the other end's going to get connected to the bleed screw on the particular brake that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to get in the car and then start pumping the brakes. So the fluid's going to flow into the line, fill the line up, and I may pre-fill it, I'm not sure, and then eventually hopefully evacuate the air. And because the end of the hose is immersed in the brake fluid, when I let up on the pedal, you would normally suck air in, but this time I'm going to have fluid in there, so hopefully I won't be sucking any air in. The one thing I have concern with is the bleed screw to the tubing here interface to make sure that I'm not going to suck in any air in there, and I'm not quite sure if that's going to work for me or not, because that would obviously defeat the purpose. But at least it'll be right at the edge, so hopefully maybe a quick little gravity bleed or something when I'm done, and that'll evacuate what little air I may have sucked in. So that's the plan. We'll get this guy back up on jack stands here and get to it. Got the highly sophisticated contraption up here, and unfortunately all I could do was press that tube onto the bleed screw. Now it fits pretty tight, but I don't have any clamps or anything, and even if I did, I'm not so sure that it would make a difference. So that's on there, and then I obviously just have that length of tubing, and then it's, again, the important part is it's completely immersed in the brake fluid. Now this is new brake fluid, and I have bled the brakes a little bit, so I don't expect dirty brake fluid to come out, but it might. So now what I'll do is I'll crack the bleed screw and then get into the car and pump the brakes, probably only once or twice. I unfortunately didn't plan too far ahead for this. I used a little bit more brake fluid than I thought I would in rebuilding everything, so I might have to cut this a little bit short. But obviously you want to check and make sure that your master cylinder doesn't go dry, because you have to start this all over again. And just based on the experience of doing it, I only probably have about 2 pumps there before this thing will go dry. Now I do need to fill this tube all the way up with brake fluid, so that's going to take a little bit of brake fluid, but then hopefully on subsequent wheels I'll have that kind of filled a little bit, so I won't have to worry about it too much. And I'm going to be in the car obviously, so I'm not going to be able to watch, so you guys are going to see this better than I will. So I'm just going to do 2 pumps and then call it good, check the master cylinder, refill it, get back in and do that, and it's just a bunch of iterations here, so we'll see how it goes. All right, so like I said, a little 7/16 wrench here to loosen this brake bleeder screw, and you don't need to loosen it too much. All right, so there's going to be brake fluid coming right now, just because I'm getting a little bit of gravity drain, and it is purple. This stuff starts when it's brand new, starts off purple, but when it sits in the pipe a little bit, it turns like an amber color. So you're going to see, you might see some weird color here, but that's all that is. 2 pumps. So I think you saw there that the liquid turned purple. No leakage from that tube as far as fluid goes, so that's good. Got a little bit of air there, maybe. 2 pumps. Master cylinder dropped a little bit. It's one nice kind of thing is I got the master cylinder right in front of me here. I'm watching it from the passenger compartment, or the driver's seat, so I can keep an eye on it. All right, I'm trying to be a little aggressive with the pedals, just to move that air out. All right, so I got just a touch of air up on the very top here. Try to clear that out so that I can tell for sure that I don't have any air in there. And again, keeping that master cylinder topped off every time. All right, let's give her 2 good pumps. All right, so we got that air out of there. Looks pretty good. I'm going to do 2 more pumps and then tighten the bleed screw up, call it good. Again, you want to start from the furthest wheel. Yeah, decided on 3 pumps. All right, so that should be good. I'll go ahead and tighten this guy up, and we'll go to the driver's side rear wheel. Again, like I think I just mentioned, you want to start furthest away from the master cylinder first and work your way from that wheel to the next furthest, to the closest. So it's passenger side rear, passenger side, or excuse me, driver's side rear, passenger front, driver's front. So it's just that iteration. I'm not going to show you all of these. There's no reason to do that, but that's how you try to do a one-man pumping operation. Glad to see that looks like new brake fluid right away. So that tells me that pretty much all of the old stuff has been flushed through, and I'm looking at fresh fluid. A little bit more confident that I've got the air out that way. So I'll finish up the next 3 wheels and we'll see what I look like for a pedal. Oh, and one more thing, don't reuse your fluid. Even if that bottle's one, you got to make sure it's really clean. Yes, it's a little pricey, especially if you're using .5 stuff. It's probably $15 for a little pint bottle, but don't reuse your fluid. It's not really worth it. Get fresh stuff in there, get that system bled out, and go to town. So let's go. the brakes again. You got a little lock up on so you can see it swerve. That's probably not good. Something's not working as well as it should. All right, everybody, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Well, a worthwhile investment, I think. A little pricey, but worthwhile. Good pedal feel. Very little sponginess, if at all. A little slow to engage it, but once it's there, it's there. You heard me lock them up, I think. Obviously, I've got some brake problems where it pulls a little bit on me, but I was able to lock up one of the tires at least slightly. So better than it was, that's for sure. So again, sorry for the editing, kind of all over the place. This took me too long to make this video. This is several weeks of a project here, so I apologize for all the random cuts and everything as I lost track of where I was, but you know, I'm not a professional. So there you go. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.